The city of Bakhmut in eastern Ukraine.
Into the city of Bakhmut.
Russian forces continue to advance on the city of Bakhmut.
This is Bakhmut, a city where a large urban battle has been taking place in the last months. A city that has been entirely demolished by intense warfare and is now the center point of the war in Ukraine. There, in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region, is where one of the fiercest and bloodiest battles of the war is currently playing out, as Russia tries to achieve its first major battlefield victory since its capture of the eastern territories back at the start of the invasion. But why has the battle been on for such a long time? And why is this city so important, you may ask? Well, really, it actually isn't such an important city after all. With a pre-war population of around 70,000 people, it's just another slightly bigger city directly on the front line, and actually capturing it won't make any significant difference in the course of the war. It is just situated on a major highway, so it naturally became a point of intense clashes between Ukrainian and Russian troops due to both sides being able to resupply themselves somewhat easily. What is important to understand about the situation in Bakhmut, though, is why there have been no advances on either side. Why has the front line been basically frozen since the massive and successful Ukrainian counteroffensive in Kherson and Kharkiv? In December, Ukraine took back about 0.01% of its territory, a smaller portion than what Russia was able to recapture this January. So the front has been literally frozen during the winter, with both sides fighting over every inch of land. You see, since late fall, any advances were simply not possible due to the so-called Rasputika, a weather period when mud basically renders all unpaved roads unusable. Capturing Bakhmut might be a crucial first step in Moscow's eastern offensive if its goal is to take Donetsk and Luhansk by the spring. Bakhmut, according to Michael Kaufman, director of Russia Studies at the American Center for Naval Analyses, is a literal gateway thanks to the highway we talked about earlier to cities like Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, both of which have recently been the targets of Russian missile strikes. Such a result is not imminent, let alone probable. Since at least May, there have been clashes between Ukrainian and Russian forces in the Bakhmut region. Bakhmut was given outsized significance as a theater of war during this protracted, drawn-out struggle of attrition, especially as troops and supplies started streaming into the tiny city. Some experts say that Bakhmut has become this rallying cry in the Russian communication arena, noting that the little city is one of the few locations where its forces have been making real progress. The phrase Bakhmut holds has actually become a national battle cry among Ukrainians. However, Russian forces have not been, at least for now, able to make it past the city's outskirts. They have mostly focused on damaging the vital ground lines that Ukrainian soldiers in the city rely on for supplies. But again, war experts estimate that the impending fall of Bakhmut through a Russian encirclement is quite unlikely. This is not good news for Putin's expansive territorial ambitions in the area, and even in the whole of Ukraine. But what is also interesting is who is actually fighting alongside Russian troops on the Eastern Front. The Wagner Group, a Russian paramilitary group that deploys up to 50,000 soldiers in Ukraine, soldiers who are stationed alongside conventional Russian forces. The Wagner Group is notoriously known for sourcing its member in Russian prisons. With the recent conquest of Soledar, a smaller town located just 9 miles north of Bakhmut, the mercenary group, which hasn't yet played a significant part in the Russian war effort, claims responsibility for causing Kiev to suffer its first significant territorial loss in months. In the battle for Bakhmut, Wagner mercenaries were ordered to wear down Ukrainian lines in preparation for any advance by conventional Russian soldiers, including Moscow's elite VDV airborne unit. So Wagner's function in the war is to act as a proxy combat force who can wear of Ukraine's defense. Although they haven't really been able to make considerable progress as analysts claim, that the Wagner Group offensive against Bakhmut actually peaked after they took Soledar. According to US sources, at least 4,000 Wagner mercenaries have died, and 10,000 more have been injured in Soledar and Bakhmut alone. So this all sounds like Russia is preparing something big in spring, something Putin could finally claim as a Russian victory and stop fabulating about the chemical weapons plants and Nazis. But it seems it will not be a simple operation to pull off. You see, Ukraine has not just been sending troops as cannon fodder into Bakhmut. They were purposely wearing off the best units Russia has, as they enjoy disproportionately lower losses than Russia. This will make any future Russian offensive more difficult as the new units come to the front lines mostly consist of poorly trained conscripts, and Ukraine counteroffensive easier, newly trained soldiers and equipment coming to Ukraine from the west. But this does not mean that the offensive is unlikely. Ukraine is fully aware of its imminency, and therefore undertakes these measures to weaken Russian capabilities before the offensive has even started. It seems like both sides are just trying to wear each other down. It just depends on who does it more effectively, and according to analysts, it's Ukraine that suffers fewer losses. So, what is likely to happen in the coming months? From what we know, Ukraine is likely trying to delay the Russian offensive for as long as possible. You see, Ukraine is expecting some really significant arms deliveries, which include modern Western battle tanks, howitzers, or Stryker infantry fighting vehicles. The recent military aid package from the US includes new long-range guided bombs, GLSDB. These have more than double the range of conventional HIMARS rockets and should arrive as soon as spring. These rockets are, of course, going to be very useful to disrupt Russian supply lines, which have a clear weakness of being very centralized, which makes them vulnerable to precision strikes. The UK will also begin training Ukrainian pilots on NATO standard fighter jets, which would be the first official training program for Ukrainian pilots on the Western fighter aircraft. This has been announced just a couple of days back when President Zelensky visited London. There was, however, no mention of providing Ukraine with Western fighter aircraft that Zelensky has been calling for. However, it is a really good sign of possible aircraft deliveries. But what if these small Russian gains in Bakhmut are the very first sign that more of Ukraine's defense could be to fall later? And if it were so, where would Russia go? It would most likely want to strengthen its position in the Zaporizhzhia region, the territory that has been officially annexed last year. The other direction in which Russia could push is to secure the whole of Donetsk, also one of the officially annexed territories. Crossing the Dnipro River in the south is very unlikely, as bridges there are destroyed there. Anyhow, there are already many reports that Putin wants to achieve something symbolic in February, to try to avenge his last year's defeats. This may likely be the discussed offensive which could, it's believed, begin on February 24th, the first anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine. In order to support offensive operations in the east and south of Ukraine, Russia may mobilize 500,000 men for military service in the spring and summer of 2023, in addition to the 300,000 called up in October 2022, according to a spokesman for the Ukrainian Defense Ministry's main intelligence directorate. Russia needs more men in order to protect the large front line spanning from Donbass to Crimea. And yes, this is another clear sign that Putin has no intention of ending the war. Yes, Ukraine has a lot to tackle in the coming months, but let's hope that the Western arms deliveries and increasingly worse quality of Russian soldiers are going to play in favor of Ukraine. So, that's it for today. If you're interested in more Russia-related videos, please be sure to visit our channel to, for example, find out why Putin so desperately needs Crimea, or how much is left of the Russian army. See you in the next one.